Thank you all very much. I'm Paul Spearman. I work for Children's and Emory, and I work a lot with Georgia Tech and with Morehouse. And I just wanted to take a second to say what a powerful thing collaboration has been for the research programs in pediatrics in this city. So we have just tremendous collaborations between these four institutions and between other institutions in the state of Georgia. And so what we have seen is that this has allowed us to recruit some of the best and brightest people into our midst. This has allowed us to build new buildings and to stimulate more basic research and more clinical research, and now increasingly health services research that is going to be a benefit across this space. And I think this is just a wonderful kind of example of what you can do in a city like Atlanta. I think it's been a terrific time for us growing in the last 5 or 6 years and even before then. So what we're going to do today is talk about collaborations with a case study. I think we want to have a vibrant discussion of a successful collaborative effort, in this case between industry and academia. So I would invite my panelists to come out now. And we'll do a casual sit at the couch and talk about a new collaboration that's developing between an industry partner and investigators at Georgia Tech. I'll be the moderator, and because these guys, at least I know backstage, were talking so avidly and loudly, frankly, I don't think that I'll have to do much. So we'll start off with introducing everyone from left to right. Mark, why don't you start?
Oh, okay. Do I need this?
No, you're on. You're mic'd.
I'm Mark Bronstein. I'm a professor of the practice in the College of Computing at Georgia Tech and associate director of the Health Systems Institute. My field is health informatics.
And I'm Margaret Wagner-Dahl, associate vice president for health IT in our extension services at Georgia Tech, and I work very specifically on the issues of interoperability.
I'm Chris Clark, and I work at UCB in strategic projects aimed largely at finding new ways for us to create value for our stakeholders, first and foremost the patients that we serve.
Great. So I'll ask Chris, if you could start off from your perspective, just start telling us about what is this collaboration about and maybe a little bit about how it got started.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think it's for foundation, maybe a word or two about UCB. One of the things that's become clear since we engaged Health Connect South is that we have a little bit of a PR opportunity within our own community. A lot of folks are just learning about UCB, and that's a product of our history and an evolution that's underway. We're a fully integrated pharmaceutical company, mid-sized. We're a large company by most definitions, but amongst our peers, we call ourselves mid-sized. We have about 8,500 people and $4 billion US in terms of revenue, but we're very heavily focused in two specific areas, immunology and CNS. And that focus has been a product of an evolution that's taken the last 10 years. If you had talked about UCB 10 years ago, you would have been talking about things like chemicals that are used in the printing of money in Australia. We were that diverse. But now we're very focused, two therapeutic areas, specialized care for very special needs patients. And so the evolution that's underway there is forcing us to think much more about how do we get value to patients, and what does that really mean? And so historically, we've been operators of a traditional system, discover a molecule, develop a molecule, commercialize a molecule, and now we're asking ourselves, could we do more? So with that background in mind, there's a ton of commercial data that we use every day in our current operations. And this data that we use helps us with things like understanding geographic correlations between utilization of healthcare, helps us understand trends in utilization in these therapeutic areas where we really focus. And so a few years ago, we asked ourselves the question of, could we take assets that are already in our possession and derive more value from them on behalf of patients? And so what happened there is we immediately went contemporaneously and saw what was happening with what IBM was doing with advanced analytics and high-performance computing. They won a little game show you guys may have heard of called Jeopardy! And we saw in that partnership an opportunity to lever state-of-the-art analytics and the resources that were already in our stable. And so we engaged a proof of concept study, and that proof of concept was quite positive and showed that you can actually take this data and build from it meaningful algorithms that you can take into the clinic potentially. We're not there yet, but that you can take and inform better clinical decisions. And so that brings us almost up to current. So you ask, how did this collaboration get started? Mark and I remark quite often, you go to a lot of meetings like this, and you don't necessarily see things really come out of it, but this is one example that's not the same. We were at a dinner where Russ was kicking off Health Connect South about a year ago, and Mark stood up and said, has anybody ever heard of Watson? Well, it just so happens that was the exact day, literally, that's not for effect, the exact day that I had received the results of the proof of concept work from IBM, our partner. And as a matter of fact, I went to Mark afterwards and said, I have heard of Watson, funny you should mention that. And so this collaboration started there. And so now what we're asking ourselves is, with a great partner in tow and proof of concept that's positive, how do we take this forward? As a company, we're evolving and we're asking these interesting questions, but what we don't have is muscle memory on how to insert that new value into the delivery system. And so that's what brought us together.
So Mark, do you want to comment on how that got started from your perspective? And,
Yeah,
and then how do you, we do go to a lot of these kinds of meetings and make connections, and there's a certain percent where things really become successful, I think.
That's right.
So that's what we want to hear about.
Well, this one was really a classic no-brainer. Georgia Tech, specifically the College of Computing at Georgia Tech, is very committed to moving more deeply into the health informatics space. And we believe that our strengths align best with analytics, with using digital health data to gain a better understanding of how to diagnose disease, how to treat disease, or even developing new medical knowledge. This is really, we're really at the beginning of what I think is going to be a whole new era for medicine and healthcare, because of the transition of medical record systems in the United States from paper to electronics. Most of you probably are aware that this is going on. The dramatic rate of change is really stunning. As recently as 5 years ago, virtually all medical records in the United States were on paper. Today, in hospitals, maybe 90% are digital. In physician practices, we're probably somewhere around 2/3. I wasn't here this morning. I understand Lucy Ide pointed out that there's a lot of heartburn about some of these systems, and there's no question that this is a bit of a sausage-making exercise. You can't move a $3 trillion industry from using 100-year-old technology to the 21st century in 5 years without creating some disruptions, but it needed to happen. And I think those of us who are close to it believe that digitalization of patient records is actually only the first wave and in a major transformation, and the second wave will be learning how to use the data from those records to create a better patient care system, a better healthcare system. And this is just a fabulous opportunity for Georgia Tech to work on what it wants to work on, and we hope for UCB and the patients it serves to benefit.
Margaret, you were telling us a little bit about your role backstage. What is your role in this ongoing collaboration? And you don't have to say that it's to do all of his work. So.
Even though that's true.
It was an interesting conversation. Well, I think what is important about my role is really about the team that Georgia Tech has invested in, that is really realizing a lot of the sort of substantive issues that Mark is raising, but really from a place of providing a structure and a process that enables us to work very proactively, whether it's with healthcare providers, with existing industry, large employers, startup companies. In fact, we have a team that's working across the state to help very small private practices really meet the regulation for attesting for meaningful use. So we are involved in a lot of the areas, but it's around this very specific issue of interoperability. What can we do to make all of these different points of contact be computable and to be able to extract data that is very meaningful? I have to say, our team is specifically focused on helping Georgia meet the goals of the triple aim. So for us, our real tangible involvement in this collaboration is to listen to what the company really, really needs reflected in the scope of work, in the different issues that the company is going to have that might be different in an academic setting. So there are all kinds of details that I would say that are really what our team is excellent at, and that's been our role.
And when you say interoperability, for those of us who are not in the computer sciences world, can you just explain what that means?
I think in this context, it's really about different types of data that you need to be able to pull together and extract things from, and that's actually really hard. You can add to that.
Yeah, it's very hard in healthcare. We have hundreds of commercial electronic health record systems, and they tend to be reasonably consistent when it comes to things that are necessary to get paid, such as a claim. And they tend to be pretty inconsistent when it comes to the way clinical data is represented and handled. And there are many other problems with the clinical data that comes out of EMRs. It's really messy, noisy data. There are whole technologies that have been developed and are being developed for how to turn that messy data into something that actually can be analyzed. We were thrilled to be able to, with the help of Children's, recruit Dr. Jimeng Sun from IBM's Yorkville lab. He's done a great deal of work in this area. He's now in the faculty at Georgia Tech and will be involved in this project. And whole new technologies using machine learning and other approaches are being developed to sort of civilize data. But there's sort of a middleware problem of collecting and aggregating the data and standardizing the data, which is also part of the interoperability problem that Margaret and her I3L lab are very involved in.
Chris, I want to get back to you and your, after the original connection that you guys made, how did you keep this going or put more meat on it, make it really work, to make it happen?
It starts with a personal investment. You have to, someone's got to do the work of forming the relationship. And it literally was as simple as following up 24 hours later with, would you like to go to lunch? And just taking a step to put us into a much more engaged conversation, and then bringing our teams along so that they can work together on the engagement. It's taken a lot of time, but the initial investment was actually relatively small to do the proper diligence of just giving something real consideration. Without that moment, we probably would have found an outlet. But I'll be honest with you, without the view that we had into the lab, this project might have died. And I'll tell you why. As you asked the question about interoperability, that's the type of question that a pharmaceutical company doesn't digest very well. We're great at understanding the risk between the bench research and commercialization, and we make really large-scale bets there all the time. But understanding how to sort out and navigate something like the interoperability of EMRs would put too much burden on a project like this for our internal capabilities. And so once we opened the door to the dialogue and actually made the physical relationship connection, followed through, if you will, the momentum was easily gained.
And in fairness, collaboration is a word that is tossed around a lot. I've heard it a lot today. There's a lot of work, which Margaret luckily had to do with, not me. There's IP issues. There's protecting confidential patient data issues. These have taken months to work out.
Well, and I want to add to that I think some of the conversation we had earlier this morning was absolutely germane to this experience. And I have to say the team that was put together to really shepherd this through really had to deal up front with the issue of what was the overall goal, what was going to be the structure, what was going to be the process, how is this going to be managed, governed. There's a lot of details that go into that. I think many of us that are in the intellectual property side of academia, we know that we have to be very attentive to the issues of the company with how IP will be managed, confidentiality, all of those things. But I think in projects like this, it goes even deeper. I think we had to actually help Chris to know the magnitude of the resources that could be made available to support this kind of project, and at the same time, to manage the expectations and to be realistic about the timing and how we could put all of this together.
Why don't we talk a little bit about what the two kind of parties, in one case industry, in another case academia, stand to gain from this collaboration? Just a little bit more specifics on that. What will the company, how will you benefit from this?
Yeah, so this is the great question, and it makes it really hard to understand when I speak of the evolution that's happening at our company, and frankly at a lot of pharma companies, most that have a long strategy, are asking themselves this very question: how will we take this ability to create value for patients and turn it into value for other stakeholders, not the least of which is shareholders? And it's not easy. It's really hard. And again, this is to the point that was just made by Margaret, is a big positive in this collaboration is we're sorting that out as we go. Frankly, the business model is not entirely obvious. What is obvious, however, though, is that there's a real opportunity. Get on a bit of a soapbox about epilepsy here, but the molecules that are being used have been developed over an array of basically 90 years. There's 30 some odd molecules out there, and epilepsy as a word is really insufficient in describing what these patients need. It's an indelicate analogy, but similar to the word cancer, it's just a word on top of a bunch of etiologies and syndromes. And so when you match those two together, it's incredibly complex to make the right choice for an epilepsy patient. And we think we can provide a tool into the clinic to assist in that. And as our company evolves, we understand, as was said earlier brilliantly, we can do well by helping people do well, and I'm sure I paraphrased that, but that's what we're attempting here, is to find a way to get this truth, if you will, into the clinic, not entirely with entire clarity on exactly how it's going to benefit us, other than we know the company with a rich pipeline and a legacy in epilepsy, we're going to make a great business out of making epilepsy patients healthier. So.
Great. How about from the Georgia Tech side? What's the academic part of this?
Well, I see several potential benefits to Georgia Tech. Obviously, the faculty involved write papers and go to meetings, and that's what faculty like to do. Georgia Tech, this may surprise you, but Georgia Tech's not historically been in the health informatics space. And to a large degree, neither have our peer institutions. This field has pretty much academically resided in medical schools around the country. For a pure science and engineering school like Georgia Tech that has no hospital, has no medical school, has no health data, I guess other than the claims of our own faculty and employees, to get into this field, it has to figure out how to collaborate with people who have the data and who have the problems. So this, in my grand scheme of things, creates a model that can be used to do more projects like this with other collaborators, and maybe even most importantly, people at Georgia Tech, important people at Georgia Tech, gain an understanding of what the opportunity really is and how we can go about partnering to do more and more of these sorts of things.
So I have a general question I'm going to throw out to whoever really feels strongest about this, but we have great hospitals here in town. We have a wealth of IT expertise, and we have EMRs and we have the databases behind them. what can we do better in this community to really put those things together? And we're kind of struggling with this in our research plan. How do we really make this gel between all of the patient data, thinking of all of the concerns about confidentiality and all, but how do we really make this gel into where we're a leading area for health IT and for research in the area?
I have to give Children's enormous credit. I mean, I was at the very first meeting when Donna Hyland came over to Georgia Tech and talked about Children's desire to build a research portfolio, to partner with Georgia Tech. And Children's has been willing to do the legwork, to stick with it over a long period of time, to provide funding, to make it happen. And Paul and I were discussing this back in the holding area there. There's just a growing portfolio of research projects between Georgia Tech and Children's. We need more of that here in Atlanta. I mean, obviously I look at the world with, I guess it's yellow tinged glasses at Georgia Tech, or whatever the Georgia Tech color is. But gold. I didn't go to Georgia Tech. Gold. Is that Stephen there? I'm in trouble. But many of the major healthcare organizations here in town are not really, I think, they don't really have quite the vision that Children's has to realize we have a Georgia Tech here. There aren't a lot of them in the whole world. We should be partnering with them to learn how to do this sort of thing together.
Well,
Margaret,
I'm going to add, I think a lot of it starts, and we've been talking about this during the day, that actually Atlanta has everything. And I'm going to say, having come from a beloved former institution up the road here, we go beyond Metro Atlanta to between Athens and Augusta. We really do have all that it takes here in terms of building something that is very, very significant. I don't think we do enough to make sure that the rest of the world knows that. And I think a lot of it starts with the very first message that was portrayed this morning about one. And what does one mean when we say us, and what is us? I think there is an enormous momentum over the years that has happened, particularly in the health, certainly the health IT arena, but other parts of the infrastructure here. And we just need to really commit to see it through all the way. And whether it's Stephen Fleming's Not the Valley or whatever, but we need to step up and really own it.
So let's get back to kind of industry-academia relationships. This is an area that many of us who haven't done as much as you guys have want to kind of jump in on. So any sort of advice and or the challenges that we should be prepared for as we look at in any area. For instance, you mentioned immunology is a big strength in your pharmaceutical company, and there's great immunologic research expertise here in town. How do those hook up? And what should we be thinking about?
Yeah, I think we have to establish some common goals, first of all, and specifically with this project, that's what's made this work, is we can go to the table with a clear understanding that we believe we can deliver to the clinic a tool that doesn't exist and is really meaningful for the patients. And that common goal has fueled us all to work really well together. Specific projects will have to find their own common goals, as you would expect, but I think the number one way is this establishment of a sense of community that we're actually on a pretty good trajectory today with making sure that people understand what's going on. We were really fortunate to get to house the Health Connect South guys on our campus for the last 12 months. And for us, that's been a wonderful opportunity because there's been this flow of people bringing ideas and understanding that, frankly, we didn't have onto our campus. We've had a history of being a commercial organization, which means we manage salespeople and medical communications and things of that nature from our campus. But we're opening our eyes to much more now. So just being connected and engaged in the community is really priceless for us.
If I could just...
You bet. Comment on.
I've said some nice things about Children's. Let me say something about UCB. I was invited to their holiday party last year, and I went largely because I figured a Belgian company, I bet the food's going to be wonderful.
The food was good.
And it was. But, you know, and I've been in healthcare for 35, 40 years. This was a company holiday party. And there at the party were a number of patients who had benefited from the products that the people in that room involved in creating and marketing and distributing, so that the people at UCB could see with their own eyes and talk with the people whose lives they're positively impacting. And I thought that was just remarkable. I will never forget that experience. I've never seen anything like it. Maybe it's commonplace, but I don't think so. So I felt even better than I felt walking in the room about working with UCB. I think we're very fortunate to have them here in Atlanta. You can't have them, they're ours.
All right, we're just about out of time, so I'll just briefly summarize that this is just an example of an active collaboration. It's still fairly early stages, but has come out of a meeting like this one, and that can be carried on between great academic center and great pharmaceutical interests. So this is, I think, an example of things that this sort of meeting is trying to build. So I want to thank all the panelists for being on this panel.